Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to talk about our new moon we have coming up this Friday morning. So it's going to be in sidereal Gemini in the star of Punarvasu. And Punarvasu is translated to return of the light or return of the brightness. And it's an indication of us repeating patterns. So it can be shown by fractals, which are these images or things in nature that repeat the pattern again and again and again within itself. The actual symbol for the star is an arrow that's been returned to its quiver. And if we can remember the story that we talked about in the last two cycles, which was our, our new moon in Mrigasira and our full moon in Mula, which was right across the way from Ardra, where the sun was. And I spoke about the story of the creator, Daksha, who wanted to procreate with his daughter Rohini. And she flees to earth in the form of a deer to escape him. And meanwhile, Rudra, who is an emanation of Shiva, shoots down the creator in the sky to stop him from pursuing his daughter. And all this calamity comes with that. Like we have earthquakes and tornadoes and fires and diseases and pestilence and all these things that maybe wouldn't have been if that hadn't taken place. And after this storm and after this suffering comes new light. It's the return of the light. And in this star, the mother Aditi is born. And she's the universal mother. Aditi is like the spaciousness of everything. And she's the mother of the Adityas, who then bring forth various aspects of godliness, of the light themselves. So this part of the story, part of this creation myth is where we're maybe a little rash and made choices that didn't work for everyone. Something bad happens, something calamitous happens, and then we're able to be born anew in this new light. And in this new light, we're also humbled, right? Because crazy things had to happen to get us here. So it wasn't that fresh newness of like, oh, we're going to make everything perfect and everything's going to be great from the outset. We've already seen that doesn't work and that didn't work. And as a result, calamity came. And now we're going to do this again, but this time we're going to do it with a little bit softer eyes and a little bit more pain in our heart and a little bit more humility and understanding and inner standing of all the different aspects of life we can't control. First of all, everything that's out of our control, which is everyone else and everything. All we can really control is our own choices and our own thinking about those choices. And then it's also this, the humility that comes with experience. As we get older, we know more, but we also have learned through all that trial and error and all that life that we've lived, everything that can go wrong. So the optimism and youthfulness of the initial time, both from Daksha's perspective of his optimism that his daughter's going to be into this and everything's going to work out, and also the optimism of Rohini turning herself into a deer and just fleeing the situation. I'm going to go find something better somewhere else. I'm going to go seek truth somewhere else because I'm not finding it in my home. I'm not finding it with my father who's aggressing against me. I'm not finding it with my husband who's just coveting me, the moon. I'm not finding it with my sisters who are jealous of me. I'm going to go find it somewhere else. So this concept, this idea really has in it the hard realities that we live that bring us back. So we live the same life, in some ways when we're old as we do when we're new, when we're young, because we become infantile again in some ways, especially if we make it to, very old age. We might become more feeble-minded. We might forget things. We might need help with things. We might not be able to live our lives unassisted anymore, but we're doing it in a very different way than a new child, right? We're doing it with all this experience of life, getting us to that point. And it's very humbling. It's very humbling. So this star, and this mother, this Aditi, right? And what's born of this sort of weird father-daughter situation is a mother, but she's also the mother of Daksha himself. So this is one of those fractals within the essence of her motherliness is also the essence of all that ever was. And the creator is part of that. And the creator, well, the creator gets its origination, if you go into, backstories, from Vishnu, who's this Godhead. And Godhead Vishnu is also born from Aditi as one of her children, as one of the Adityas, in the form of Vamana, a dwarf. So it's actually said that he's born to her many times. It said that he's born to Aditi many times. I think 7 is the number of times that he's born to her. And that is in the form of Krishna. When Vishnu comes as Krishna, his true mother, who has him in like a prison cell because her brother wants to kill all of her children. Her name is Devaki, and she has him in a prison cell, and her husband carries him to Vrindavan and gives him to a different family to care for him, so that he can survive. And they trade out the children, but he's born to her. That's said to be also, Devaki is said to be Aditi, a form of Aditi. So anyway, this idea of the patterns within the patterns, and that's the concept of motherhood over this sort of patriarchal father figure who thinks he's doing what's right by propagating with his daughter, is another aspect that the story takes a turn. And this star brings us from Gemini, from this mental realm where we think about everything and information, into the sign of Cancer, where we feel things and we are able to feel into the rightness and into whether something speaks to our heart as opposed to our mind. So the moon and the sun, as we can see here, are still in these final degrees of Gemini in that part of Punarvasu, and they will, move into Cancer. The moon especially will move right away. The sun will be moving on the 14th into Cancer. But Mercury has just moved into his own sign. So he's just fresh into his own sign. And this is a big deal for several reasons. First of all, Mercury is the ruler of this new moon, right? This is where, this is, who we look to see the quality of the moon and sun, where they are, is the ruler, and the ruler's joined them in his own sign in strong dignity. And Mercury has been either retrograde or joined the North Node Rahu in Taurus for quite some time. So we've had a lot of confusion around Mercury things. Mercury's our communication. It's our intake of information. So it's our discernment, our capacity to, file through data and make it, either kind of make truth false. This part of us that can do that. And doesn't really have a lot of an agenda when it's in its own sign. When Mercury's in Gemini, we have a capacity to be really objective and open-minded in that way. We also have a curiosity that causes us to continue to search. And you can see Mercury's in that star of Mrigashira. And so it's where we're seeking truth. We're seeking truth through the information, filing through all the fluff to get to the truth. And there's a lot of fluff these days. There is a lot that is not truth. And since Mercury has been joined this North Node, the North Node causes a lot of deception, illusion, delusion, lies, distortion, a magnification of things. Really, joined Mercury, it can be quite problematic. And prior to that, or leading up to that, Mercury was retrograde, where there was a lot of sort of inner buildup, but not the clarity and forward movement that we like to see with our information processing. So this is a big moment for us where we've just come through the 2 eclipses and then a really intense full moon on the galactic plane and 2 of the most intense stars, Mula and Sagittarius, and the sun being in Ardra in Gemini, and really forcing us to look at this confirmation bias we have and the way that we take in information and what our agenda is, which is really coming from our beliefs. And now we have a calmer way of coming back to this. So we're coming back to this with a little bit more light. We're coming back to this with Mercury being in his own sign without the influence of Rahu on him and not being retrograde. And we have Jupiter giving drishti mainly to this Mercury because it's a one-way drishti. Jupiter gives a 5-house drishti, and the moon and the sun are already at this later degree. So you can see Jupiter's moving backwards towards Mercury in this drishti, right? He's moving back degrees, lessening degrees. Mercury's moving forward. So they're moving towards each other in this exchange, which is, it's not really an exchange because Mercury's not giving it back. Jupiter's just giving the one way. But Jupiter is bringing a sense of an agenda of sorts, a part of us that wants to assimilate the information and make meaning of it. And Mercury in Mrigashira searching for meaning, searching for truth, but wanting to be objective about it still. Whereas Jupiter is bringing out all that knowledge we have of the Aquarius themes of society and how society isn't fair and top-down leadership and hierarchy and all these different factors that come into, and wealth, unequal wealth distribution, things like this that make the world less good for most people. Specifically in the star of Satyabhishak, which I've spoken about a lot. It's a star of corruption. It's a star where we see corruption. It's the hundreds of eyes at night in the night sky seeing what's going on in the dark. And it's the corruption of both the politicians and the people who hold power, as well as the seedy underworld of corruption that is, has been highlighted again and again and again in our world, and maybe gets more airplay than the corruption of the established government and organizations around that. So this is a retrograde Jupiter. It's internalizing the information. It's building up, it's collecting, it's becoming hyper-focused for us inside, but it's not manifesting on the outside. We're not able to fully speak to it on the outside. It's just burbling up here on the inside. And it's a recent retrograde. So he was moving forward, just started to move backwards right before that last full moon. And he will be retrograde until October, as will Saturn. So both of these 2 planets are going to be retrograde for quite some more time. So there's going to be this buildup. There's going to be a buildup of what we believe and what we're really seeing, and also our fear, because Jupiter is moving back into Capricorn, and Saturn with our commitments and what we're committed to and what we are willing to roll our sleeves up and spend our time and our bodily life force energy on. And what, how does that meet what we believe? And are they aligned? And have we committed to good things? And this cycle, this new moon cycle, is calling in our intellect to really stay in that state of discernment, as we do have this bit of an agenda coming from Aquarius, as we do have opinions, beliefs, ideas about how the world is. And we're using that to sort of send our energy over to this new moon. We also have that capacity to really sit back and not just take in information the way that we want to take it in, as it easily fits what we already believe, but perhaps having some objectivity about it so we can see new things, new perspectives, new ways that maybe we haven't looked at it before. And one of the best ways to do this, and what's so positive about Mercury being in Gemini, is that we don't tend to berate or fight. It's more of a curiosity and a questioning, a nature of questioning, rather than saying, this is what it's like. It's like, well, why is it like that? Or how did we draw that conclusion? How did we get here? What made us believe that? What different blocks of information got us here? And were those blocks of information true? So this is an important time for us to really take back our discernment and own what we know as true and own what we believe. And it's okay to have beliefs. We need to have beliefs. We can't have everything just be an objective information field. That's actually been one of the problems we've had in our world, is there's not enough stances. There's not enough people standing up for anything because there's just more information coming, more information. And your beliefs are often very much deep down. We don't fully understand them. So we have beliefs that we don't really even know, that are actually driving the show much more than our external beliefs that we share and maybe, post about or wear t-shirts about or have bumper stickers about. We have much deeper held beliefs that we don't look at all the time. And that's a lot of what was blowing up in this last full moon. So it's okay to have beliefs. We need to have beliefs, but we need to examine them and know what the root of them are and why we think the way we do. And we need to examine our information and make sure it's actually true information. And we need to look at the process of how we got where we got. Because if we ever hope to make things different, we need to know how we got here so that we don't just repeat the wrong mistakes. Repeating the patterns in Punarvasu, we want to repeat every time, every cycle, we want to come back with more light and with more truth. And the Adityas really represent different aspects of this light and this truth. In the original text in the Rig Veda, there was maybe 6 to 8 Adityas, and the number grew with various texts. And the which deities were actually named as the Adityas has also shifted over time. So it's not a clear-cut answer, but Surya, the sun, is said to be, the word Aditya can actually refer to one of the names of Surya, one of the names of the sun. And they're all emanations of light in some way. And many of them ruled various nakshatras that come in the storyline afterwards. The nakshatras, the 27 nakshatras, are actually a story, a creation story. And they start with Ashwini and they move their way through into Revati at the end. And Pushan, who rules Revati, is one of the Adityas. Bhaga, who rules Purva Falguni in Leo, is one of the Adityas. Savitur, who rules Hasta in Virgo, and also Aryaman, who rules Uttara Falguni. That's part in Leo, part in Virgo. Those are them. Vastar, who rules Chitra, which is Virgo to Libra, is the energy of creation that manifests as either Maya for the anti-gods, for the Asuras, and as Vishwakarma for the Devas. These are all Adityas. Vishnu, he comes as Vamana, as the dwarf, as Aditi's son, but Vishnu himself rules the star of Shravana. Varuna rules Satabhishak, the 100 eyes, here in where Jupiter is. Anuradha is ruled by Mitra, the aspect of God as a friend. So each of these things, Indra rules Jaistha, and also Indra Agni rules Vishaka, but some would say that's just an aspect of Agni. That's not actually Indra and Agni, but Indra himself rules the final star of Scorpio, which is Jaistha. So each of these, the rest of the story as it goes, the rest of this myth of creativity and how it moves through the sky and the constellations and the really the stars behind the constellations, which are the nakshatras, which make up the Vedic system, are ruled by these Adityas, these children of Aditi. And so this is a time when we have more peace, more light, more blessings, but we still have all the things that have been going on in the background present. They're just not hammering us as they have been. We do still have Venus and Mars here, and the drishti from Saturn is less because he's retrograde in lesser degrees, and they're above him now in higher degrees. But these two planets here in Cancer, specifically in Aslasia, in the star of clinging, can still be causing some issues relationally speaking. Venus in Cancer can be one where we feel like we're giving and giving and giving and nurturing in our adult relationships, whether they're romantic or whether they're business partnerships. And we don't necessarily feel like we're getting back in return what we're giving. And then Mars in Cancer is actually debilitated. So we have the problem of the fact that Mars is not as disciplined, not as courageous, not as able to stand in the fire and do what needs to be done. There's a lot more stops and starts, a lot more need for self-care, a lot more need for crying, perhaps an emotional release. And sometimes we don't release our emotions, especially with these two together. And we might have this sort of buildup of relational things that are bothering us, and we might not release them because we feel like we're supposed to be this motherly figure of unconditional love. And as a result, our anger can come out in very passive aggressive ways from behind the scenes where we don't necessarily even know they're coming, and little remarks here and there and little ways that we show that we're not totally happy. This is what Mars does in Cancer. It actually becomes angry as a result of not having clear-cut discipline and not having a clear channel of which to activate that fire and carry it somewhere. And so it gets built up and sort of angry, but in a Cancer-y way, in an emotional way. And Venus also here is going to cause not just that relational fire that happens when Venus and Mars come together, where there's that conflict between compromise and passion, but also Venus in and of herself in the sign of Cancer is challenged just by virtue of being too much of a mom to adult relations that are not supposed to be that way. Adult relationships that are supposed to be a really harmonious give and take. And then we overgive and feel bereft, feel like someone hasn't given us back. And having Saturn retrograde staring at these two means that we're questioning our commitments around our relationships with people. It's that part of us that's kind of internalizing this commitment of hard work to what? To people who are going to take advantage of us or aren't going to give us in return, and are just going to be taking and taking. And of course, everyone's feeling this way. When these are transits and they're not in someone's natal chart, everyone's experiencing this. So the person that you feel like you're giving and giving and giving to feels the same way probably about you, that they're doing so much and they're not being appreciated. And that you're taking away their discipline because they're spending so much time helping you. They're not able to do all the things they need to do to discipline themselves. And they're quite, that same questioning of commitment and the hard work that you're doing, it's coming from all perspectives. So it's always something to understand in these reports, especially these new and full moon reports I do, or these transit reports I do, where it's not about an individual chart. It really is everyone's experience. So while you're sitting here thinking, yes, that is happening, that person's doing that to me, it's like that other person's having that same experience. And that's the same for groups of people. And that's the same for bodies of governance, for, companies, for your workplace, for all the different aspects of the world that we participate in. Each entity is having this experience. And that's important to understand so that we're not caught up in our own part of the experience without recognition and understanding of everyone else's part in the experience. That's part of where the trouble came in the beginning of that creation story, is a lot of assumptions, right? That's one of the golden rules, is don't make assumptions, or the 4 agreements is not to make assumptions. And one of the things we learn as we get older is that a lot of our assumptions are just not true. Whatever we assumed somebody was thinking, or whatever we assumed somebody's plan was, or whatever we thought someone was going to do, if we assume our partner's going to stop at the grocery store on the way home and get the thing that we told them last night, randomly in conversation we were out of, that's a big assumption. Why not say, hey, can you go to the grocery store and get that thing that we're out of that I said last night, so that there's clarity. And then that person can say, oh, that works for me, or no, that doesn't work for me. I'm not going to be able to stop at the store. And then you can make an arrangement to go yourself. So there's a lot of problems we encounter. Probably a huge percentage of the problems we encounter come from assumptions that we make. And a lot of the times we make assumptions because we're too afraid to ask. We're too afraid to ask someone else to do something for us, even though it's proven time and time again that people actually enjoy doing things for one another, that actually it makes us feel valuable and useful. We can see it with children, with small children, they love to be helpful. And we can see with our partners, they actually love to be helpful. What people don't like is to be berated after the fact for not doing something they were expected to do or assumed to do. That's not fun for people, but actually being helpful is something that we all want to be. It shows our contribution, and that's a basic need we all have, is to be valued and to be considered important and useful. And the other value we really have is to have some autonomy, to have some freedom. And so when we are feeling oppressed because of other people's expectations or assumptions, then that's going to make us feel angry. And we're going to fight for our freedom in this case, very Cancerian ways, where we're more emotional and more teary about it, and less clear in our what's making us angry and what can be done about it. So these are all things to look at, and just, understand, because the more that we see things, the more we see the patterns arising, the more we understand the ways in which we're making assumptions, the more we are clear with ourselves about where our beliefs came from and what information we're taking in, the more clear we can be going forward and make different choices that do work for us and that aren't going to create the same calamity again and again. Because the life that we live is cyclical, right? And there are repeating patterns within it, but we come back to the same point wiser every time. Each time there's more we know, and we can do something a little different, but we really need to examine the roots of how we get where we get. If we're going to do that, we can't just keep changing, lop off the top and change a little bit. It's not how it works. So hopefully this is helpful to you. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my newsletter, you can do that at www.radha, R-A-D-H-A, home, H-O-M-E, yoga.com. And I have free reports that come out. So where Jupiter is in Aquarius in your chart and what that rules for you, where the North Node, the South Node, the eclipse points are in your chart. Both of those are sending out right now. I create new ones as we have big transits that occur with Saturn and Jupiter in the nodes. And also every 2 weeks, you get the full and new moon reports directly to your inbox. You can like, comment, and share. And I hope to see you again really soon. Namaste.